We have received many experiences over the days and weeks concerning a coming period of darkness that will befall humanity. We were actually skeptical about sharing them because we did not want to cause panic, especially in sensitive matters such as this. But then some days ago, we received one, and the brother who sent in the experience kept sending us messages revealing that he continued to have dreams almost on a daily basis. He said that what he saw during his death experience is coming and is getting closer, and he pleaded with us to share it and allow viewers to discern for themselves and not withhold from them what could eventually save their lives and the lives of their families. That is why we are sharing his experience with you today. Now tell us where you are watching from. Also, be honest with us and share one thing you are trusting God for in this season of your life. Our prayer team will join you in prayer for the next 3 days, and we believe and trust God in faith with you that you will see the answer to your request come to pass. I will now begin reading this experience. My name is Dr. Raymond Kowalski. I am 61 years old. I hold a PhD in nuclear physics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and for the better part of 3 decades, I worked as a senior weapons physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. My work was classified. Most of what I did, I still cannot talk about. But I can tell you this. I spent my career calculating things that most people do not even want to think about. Blast radius, radiation dispersal, atmospheric impact after a high-energy detonation. I modeled what happens to the sky, to the ground, to living tissue, when energy is released at a scale that most humans cannot even picture in their minds. I am telling you all of this because I want you to understand what kind of man I was before February 14th, 2026. I was not a soft man. I was not a man who cried easily or talked about feelings at dinner. My wife, Patricia, she will tell you that I was the kind of person who needed 3 data points before making a restaurant reservation. My 2 sons, Marcus and Daniel, both grown now, they used to joke that I would ask for a peer-reviewed citation before agreeing that the sky was blue. That was the kind of man I was. Precise, careful, not easily moved by anything that could not be measured. I grew up in a Lutheran household in Wisconsin. My mother prayed every morning before breakfast. My father went to church most Sundays because he said it kept the community together, not necessarily because he believed every word in the Bible. I was somewhere in between. I did not hate religion. I did not mock people who believed. But privately, quietly, I had come to the conclusion somewhere in my 30s that the universe was a system, a very large, very complicated, very beautiful system. And systems do not have feelings. They do not intervene in human affairs. They do not hear prayers or answer them. They just run, like a machine that was turned on a very long time ago and has been running ever since without anyone at the controls. That was my worldview. I carried it into every laboratory I worked in. I carried it home every evening. Patricia believed. She went to Mass on Sundays, even after we moved from a Catholic neighborhood to one that was mostly Protestant. She never pushed me. She would just squeeze my hand on the way out of the car and go in by herself. I would drive to the coffee shop nearby and read journals until she was done. We had a good marriage, a quiet understanding. She respected my skepticism. I respected her faith. Neither of us ever won the argument. On the evening of February 13th, 2026, I had stayed late at the laboratory finishing a simulation. There had been nothing unusual about that day. I had eaten lunch at my desk, reviewed 2 junior physicists' models, sent a few emails, and driven home just after 8 in the evening. Patricia had left a plate of food in the microwave for me. I ate it alone at the kitchen counter because she had already gone to bed. I remember rinsing the plate and thinking I should call Marcus that weekend, because he had mentioned something about his son's school play. I thought that, and then I went to bed. I did not wake up the next morning. Patricia told me later that she found me at around 6 in the morning. She said she reached out to touch my arm and I was cold. She screamed. She called 911. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, which she says felt like 8 hours. They worked on me for a long time. The hospital told us afterward that I had suffered a massive heart attack during the night. Ventricular fibrillation caused by an undiagnosed heart condition. My heart had gone into a chaotic rhythm and simply stopped doing its job. I had no symptoms, no warning, no dramatic chest pain or movie moment where I clutched my shirt and fell against the wall. I just stopped living sometime after I rinsed that plate and walked upstairs. They brought me back, but not before something happened that I am still, even now, struggling to find the right words to describe. I am a physicist. I understand that the brain, when deprived of oxygen, can produce experiences that feel very real. I know the arguments. I have read the studies. Temporal lobe activity, REM intrusion, chemical cascades triggered by cellular distress. I have thought about every single one of those explanations since I came back. I have turned them over in my mind the way I used to turn over equations, looking for the inconsistency, looking for the error. And every time I come up against the same wall, what I experience does not fit inside any of those explanations, not because I refuse to accept a natural cause, but because what I saw was too ordered, too specific, too weighted with information I had no way of already knowing, to have come from a dying brain producing random noise. So I am going to tell you what happened, not what I think it means for everyone, not what doctrine or theology it supports, just what I saw and what was shown to me. In the order it was shown to me, I became aware that I was no longer in my bedroom. There was no transition that I noticed. One moment there was nothing, and then I was standing somewhere, and I could see, not the way you see when you open your eyes in a lit room. This was different. It was as if seeing was something my whole body was doing, not just my eyes. I could not tell you if there was a sky above me or ground below me in the way I normally understood those things. But I was standing and there was space around me, and I was not afraid. That last part surprised me later, when I thought about it. A man wakes up dead, and he is not afraid. But that is the truth of it. There were other people around me. I say people because that is the closest word I have. They looked like people. They were moving slowly, in a direction that felt natural to move in. Not walking exactly, but something close to it, a flowing. And I joined them without deciding to. It felt like the right thing to do, the way breathing feels like the right thing to do. You do not choose it, you just do it, because that is what you are supposed to be doing in that moment. We moved together for what I can only describe as a long time, though I had no way of measuring it. There was a quality to the direction we were heading that I can only call warmth, not temperature, not heat the way a radiator produces heat. Something that went deeper than the skin and ahead of us, and I could see this even though it was far away. There was what looked like water falling, a waterfall, but made of something that was not quite water. It was bright, and it was moving, and it had a sound to it that I wanted to get closer to. I found myself wanting to reach it more than I'd ever wanted anything in my career, more than I had wanted to solve any equation or complete any model. That pull was stronger than anything I had felt in my life. And then I stopped, not because I decided to, because something made me stop. I looked to my right and there was a figure standing there. He was not walking with the rest of us. He was not moving at all. He was just standing there, and he was looking at me. Only at me. The others kept moving. They did not seem to see him or notice him or slow down in any way. But I saw him immediately, and I knew without being told that he had been waiting. Not waiting the way you wait at a bus stop, fidgeting and checking your phone. Waiting the way a person waits when they already knew you were coming. Settled, still, like he had all the time in the world, and had already decided how he was going to use it. He did not look the way I would have imagined an angel to look. I grew up with images from church bulletins and Christmas cards, wings and white robes and a soft glow. This was not that. He was simply there in a way that made everything around him feel less real by comparison. He had a presence that reminded me of the feeling you get when you stand next to something extremely powerful. Not threatening, just significant. The way you feel standing next to a reactor that is running. You know something enormous is happening even if you cannot see it directly. I stopped walking toward the waterfall. The pull was still there. I still wanted to go. But I looked at him and I understood that I was not going there. Not today. There was no negotiation. No explanation given yet. Just that understanding, clear and quiet. The way a fact is clear when the math is right. He turned. He did not gesture for me to follow him. He simply turned and began moving in a different direction, away from the waterfall, away from the other souls, away from the warmth. and I followed him. I want to be honest about this because I know how it sounds. A man who spent his whole life refusing to be led anywhere without evidence, following without a word of explanation. I followed him. There was no resistance in me, not a flicker of it. I just went. The direction he led me in was not pleasant. The warmth behind us faded quickly. The quality of the space around us changed. I do not have technical language for what I mean by that, which is strange for me because technical language is usually all I have. It became heavy. That is the best word. The air, or whatever the equivalent was in that place, became heavy the way the air gets before a very bad storm, and dark. Not dark like a room with the lights off, dark like something that was actively pushing light away, like darkness that had a will behind it. And then I felt it. Fear is a word I have used throughout my life to describe a response to data. A threat is identified. The brain processes it, the body responds. That is fear in the way I have always understood it. What I felt in that darkness was not that. It was not a response to a specific threat that I could identify and categorize. It was something older. Something that reached past my reasoning mind and grabbed hold of something underneath it. Something I did not even know was there to grab. I felt it in a way that had nothing to do with thought or analysis. It was just there, pressing from every direction, and it was enormous. I thought I was in hell. I want to say that plainly because that is exactly what I thought. I, Dr. Raymond Kowalski, lifelong skeptic, man of measurements and models and peer-reviewed certainty, stood in that darkness and thought with complete conviction that I had been brought to a place of eternal punishment, and the thought that followed that one was worse. I thought that this was only the beginning. I do not know where that second thought came from. It arrived the way the first thought arrived, fully formed, certain, pressing down on me from the inside. This is only the beginning. My heart, or whatever, was doing the work my heart used to do in that place. Began to do something that I can only describe as beating wrong. Rapid, uneven, terrified. I had given up. I had completely given up. I was a man who prided himself on never giving up on a problem. But this was not a problem I knew how to work. There was no variable I could isolate, no model I could build. I just stood there in that darkness and surrendered to the conclusion that I had been wrong about everything, and that the cost of being wrong was this, exactly this, forever. And then the angel spoke. He had not spoken before, not when he waited for me, not when he turned and walked, and I followed, not when the darkness closed in around us. He had said nothing, no introduction, no greeting, no softening of what was about to happen. He simply spoke, and what he said reached me through the fear the way a radio signal reaches you through static. Clear, cutting through everything else. He told me that what I was feeling was a taste. That is the word that came to me, a taste. Like when you put the tip of your tongue to something to understand what it is before you decide how much of it to take in. He told me that this darkness, this weight, this fear without a name, was a version of what was coming. Not for me, not specifically as a punishment for my life, but coming for the world, coming for the place I had just left. He told me that the people I cared about, the people still living their lives, still waking up to make coffee and drive to work and tuck their children in at night, were walking towards something, and most of them did not know it. That was the first time he spoke. No pleasantries, no easing into the topic. He simply told me, and I heard him, and I believed him in a way I had never believed anything that I could not also measure. Then he began to show me things. 3 things specifically. He did not lay them all out at the beginning and ask me to choose which one I wanted to understand first. He simply began, and the order he chose was deliberate. I am certain of that now. He started from the end. He showed me the last of the 3 things first, and then the second, and then the first. And I think the reason he did it that way was because he needed me to understand the full weight of where everything was heading before he could show me how it began. If he had started from the beginning and worked forward, I do not think I would have understood the urgency the same way. Showing me the end first made every earlier part feel like what it was. A warning. A genuine warning given while there was still time to do something about it. So that is how I am going to tell it to you. The way he showed it to me. From the last thing to the first, and I'm going to hold back the dates until I reach the point in the telling where each one belongs, because that is how he gave them to me, attached to the event they described, not handed over in a list at the beginning. The dates matter, but they matter most when you already understand what they are. Dates for. He showed me the third event first. Before I tell you what he showed me, I want to describe what the experience of being shown something by him was like, because it was not like watching a film or reading a report. It was more like being placed inside a reality and allowed to observe it from a position of complete awareness. I could see everything at once. Distances that should have been too great to perceive were suddenly not. Details that should have been too small to notice were perfectly clear. And alongside everything I was seeing, I was also understanding. Not because anyone was giving me a running explanation, but because the understanding arrived with the seeing, the way heat arrives with flame. You do not have to be told that fire is hot. You feel it at the same moment you see it. What he showed me in this third event was the most serious thing I have ever witnessed in my life. And I have spent 30 years working with information about what nuclear weapons do to the physical world. What he showed me was heavier than any of that. It was heavier because it was not theoretical. It was not a model. It was something that is going to happen, and the weight of knowing that has not left me since I came back. He showed me a massive solar event striking the Earth, a coronal mass ejection of a size that makes everything in recorded scientific history look small. I understood immediately, with the part of me that is still a physicist, what I was looking at. I have spent years studying electromagnetic pulse scenarios. I have modeled geomagnetic storm impacts on power infrastructure. I know what a large solar event can do to a grid. What he showed me was beyond any scenario I had ever modeled professionally. It was beyond the Carrington event of 1859, which is the largest solar storm in the historical record. What he showed me was something that the field of space weather science does not yet have adequate language to describe, because nothing like it has happened within the time frame of modern technological civilization. But he also showed me that this solar event was not arriving alone. At the same moment it struck the Earth, a supernatural darkness descended on the planet. Not a darkness caused by the solar event, something separate, something that came from a different source entirely, and arrived at the exact same moment as if the timing was intentional. Because it was intentional, he communicated that to me clearly. These two things happening at once was not coincidence, it was coordination. The solar event in this third period caused damage that went beyond what the first event had done. The power grids did not just stop, they were destroyed. Physically, permanently destroyed. Transformers that take years to manufacture burned out. Transmission lines melted, the kind of infrastructure damaged that cannot be repaired in weeks or months. He showed me that after this third event, the world would not return to the kind of electrical civilization that existed before it. The systems were gone. What came next would have to be built differently, from the ground up, by the people who remained and by what they chose to build together. He showed me that during this third event, something happened that had never happened before in human history. Every person on Earth at the same time was able to see the spiritual dimension that exists alongside the physical world. He communicated to me that this dimension has always been there. It has always been real, but human beings in ordinary life do not perceive it directly. During this third event, that barrier was removed. Every person could see it, and what each person saw depended entirely on what they had chosen during their life up to that point. The people who had lived a genuine faith, who had built a real relationship with God, and had allowed that relationship to change how they lived day to day. Those people saw something that confirmed and amplified everything they had believed. He showed me that for them this period was not terrifying. It was the opposite. It was a kind of arrival. Everything they had trusted in for years suddenly became completely visible. The things they had prayed to, the presence they had sensed in moments of quiet, the protection they had believed in, all of it became undeniable, present, real in a way that surpassed even their deepest experiences of faith. But for the people who had spent their lives denying that any spiritual dimension existed, or who had known it existed, and had chosen to align themselves with the darker parts of it, this period of visibility was a different experience entirely. He showed me that the darkness they had been living alongside without fully seeing it became fully visible to them. He communicated to me that this was not a cruelty, it was a truth. They were seeing for the first time with complete clarity the reality of what they had been choosing. Some of them, seeing it clearly for the first time, turned. Some did not. He showed me that people who had built genuine faith and genuine relationships with each other in the months before this third event were the ones who came through it with something intact. They were not just surviving. They were the people that others were turning to. They had something that could not be manufactured quickly in a crisis. They had real trust built over real time. They had practiced depending on each other. They had learned what it felt like to ask for help and to give it. And when everything around them was in disorder, that foundation held. He showed me the opposite as well. People who had come to faith quickly during the second event, without letting that faith actually change how they were living, found that their faith was not deep enough to hold them through the weight of this third event. Some walked away. Some became angry. He communicated to me that this was not a judgment on those people as much as it was a revelation of what had actually taken root and what had not. Real faith changes how a person lives. It changes what they value and how they treat the people around them and what they are willing to sacrifice. If those things had not changed, then what had happened during the second event had not been real transformation. It had been a response to fear. And fear, once it finds a new object, moves on. He communicated to me that after this third event, the world that emerged was simpler and in many ways more human than the world before it. The technological complexity that had defined the previous century of civilization was gone, and what replaced it was something that required people to be present to each other in ways that the old world had made it easy to avoid. He showed me that this was not entirely a loss. He communicated that there were things about human life that had been buried under the weight of modern systems. Things about connection and meaning and daily purpose that were able to come back when those systems were no longer in the way. The date he gave me for this third event, the one I have been holding back until now, is August 2026. That is when it begins. That is the last of the 3 periods of darkness. And everything he showed me before that date, the second event and the first, can be understood as preparation for it. Steps in a sequence, each one building toward that final period, and each one offering people the chance to be further along in their preparation when it arrived. Then he moved back. He showed me the second of the 3 events, and the character of the second event was completely different from both the first and the third. There was no solar storm involved in the second event, no electromagnetic pulse, no technological disruption. He showed me that if you had a scientific instrument of any kind and pointed it at the sky during the second event, you would measure nothing unusual. Everything physical would appear normal, and yet the darkness that came during this second period would be more total, in certain ways, than anything produced by a power failure. Because this darkness was not about electricity, it was about something inside people. He showed me this second darkness beginning at midnight, starting from a specific location in the Middle East, which he made clear to me without my having to ask, and spreading from there outward in every direction until it had covered the entire earth. He showed me that this happened gradually enough that people could watch it coming if they were paying attention, but quickly enough that within a matter of hours it had reached every corner of the planet. And then he revealed to me how this darkness worked differently for different people. And this is the part that I found most striking as someone who had spent his entire life valuing objective, measurable, externally verifiable reality. He showed me that 2 people could be standing in the same room during this second event, and one of them could see clearly while the other was completely blind. Not blind because of any physical condition, blind because of the condition of what was inside them. He communicated to me that this second darkness was like a kind of test that no one could study for or fake their way through. It revealed exactly what was actually there inside each person, stripped of every performance and every habit and every polished external presentation. The people who carried genuine faith walked through those 3 days able to see, not because they were better people in some simple moral accounting sense, but because there was something real inside them that this darkness could not extinguish. He showed me that those people did not respond to the darkness by retreating or protecting themselves. They went toward the people around them who could not see. They took people by the hand. They sat with them. They talked with them. He communicated to me that during this second period, conversations happened between people that would never have happened in ordinary life, because ordinary life is full of exits. You can always change the subject. You can always look at your phone. You can always get busy with something else. During the second event, there was nowhere else to go and nothing else to look at. The darkness had removed every distraction, and what was left was people facing each other, with nowhere to hide. He showed me that a very large number of people came to genuine faith during this second period. He communicated that the number was over 200 million. I want to say that again because it is a number that stopped me when I first received it. Over 200 million people in 3 days coming to a genuine and lasting faith, not a panicked religious response that fades when the crisis ends. Something real, something that stayed with them afterward and changed how they lived going forward. He communicated to me that the conditions of the second period were uniquely suited to this kind of genuine encounter because they removed the things that normally prevent it. The noise was gone. The distraction was gone. The busyness that keeps most people from ever sitting still long enough to hear anything beyond their own thoughts was gone. And in that quiet, in that darkness, something that had always been there became audible and visible to people who had never been still enough to perceive it before. He showed me that when people turned during the second event, when they genuinely opened toward something larger than themselves, the change was immediate and visible. The darkness around them changed, not for everyone watching, but in a way that was real and that those people carried with them when the 3 days ended. The world on the other side of the second event was measurably different in terms of who people were and what they believed from the world that had entered it. He communicated to me that the people who came through the second event genuinely changed were the ones who would be most able to help the people around them during the third event because they had experienced something real. They had not just read about faith or inherited it or performed it. They had encountered something in the darkness personally, and they knew what it was. And when the third event came, that personal knowledge was the thing that made them useful to the people around them who were experiencing the full weight of the third period without any foundation at all. The date for this second event, held until now, is March 21st, 2026. That is when the second darkness begins, 19 days after the first. And that brings me to the first event, the one he showed me last, even though it is the one that comes first in time, the one that begins everything. He showed me a coronal mass ejection. I want to be specific about this because I understand the physics involved. A coronal mass ejection is a burst of plasma and magnetic field from the sun's surface. When a large one reaches Earth, it interacts with the planet's magnetic field and can induce massive electrical currents in long conductors, meaning power lines, pipelines, and the copper wiring inside electronic devices. The historical record includes several large geomagnetic storms that caused significant damage to early electrical infrastructure. The one he showed me was of a magnitude that would not just disrupt those systems but stop them entirely. Every device containing a microchip, every electronic system of any complexity, simply ceasing to function at the moment the pulse arrived. He showed me this pulse sweeping across the planet starting from the day side, the side of the Earth facing the sun at that moment, and rolling outward from there. He showed me the moment it hit and what happened in the immediate aftermath. Everything that ran on electricity or contained a microprocessor simply stopped. He showed me this happening everywhere at once, in every country, in every city, in every building. Cars stopped on roads because their engine management systems failed. Planes that were in the air had to be guided down without radar or radio communication, relying entirely on the training and judgment of their crews. Hospitals switched to backup generators but found that those generators could not power the full complement of modern medical equipment. Emergency services lost their dispatch systems. Grocery stores could not process transactions because their point-of-sale systems were down. Traffic lights went dark. Everything that required a chip to function stopped functioning at the same moment. He communicated to me that the death toll in the first 24 hours would be significant, particularly among people whose lives depended directly on medical technology. People on ventilators, people receiving electronically monitored treatment, people whose medication required refrigeration, and whose ability to access replacement supply was suddenly cut off. He communicated to me that this grief was real and was not to be minimized or explained away. It was a genuine cost. He did not present this to me as something other than what it was. It was loss, real loss. But he also showed me what happened in the hours and days that followed, and this is the part that I have thought about most since coming back. He showed me what happens to people when the systems they depend on disappear and they have nothing left but each other. He showed me that in the silence that followed the pulse, something began to happen among people that had not been happening before. They looked up, not at screens, because the screens were dead, not at the systems that usually told them what to do and where to go and what to think about. They looked at each other, and many of them, perhaps for the first time in years, actually saw each other. He showed me that people who had not spoken to their neighbors in years began knocking on doors and asking if everyone was all right. He showed me people sharing what they had, food and candles and blankets and knowledge, because the transaction systems that usually mediated those exchanges were gone, and what was left was just people with things and people who needed them. He showed me that the 3 days of the first event, as difficult as they were, produced something in human beings that the years before had been slowly eroding, a sense of being connected to the people around them, a sense of being part of something local and immediate and real. He showed me places of worship filling up during those 3 days, not because anyone organized it, not because there was a program or an announcement or a social media post, simply because when the noise stops and the screens go dark and there's nothing left to distract from the fundamental questions of life, people begin walking toward the places where those questions have historically been taken seriously. He showed me that the silence of those 3 days was the first genuine silence that many people had experienced in decades, and that, in that silence, something became audible that had been drowned out for a very long time. He communicated to me repeatedly throughout the showing of this first event that the purpose of it was not punishment. He communicated that the God who had made the world and all the people in it had not made them to live the way they were living, separated from each other by devices and schedules, and the constant noise of a world that never stops moving. He communicated that these 3 days were a kind of gift, even though they arrived in a painful form, a pause, a forced stillness in which it became possible to hear things that the pace of modern life had made inaudible. He showed me that the first event would last exactly 72 hours, 3 days and 3 nights, and when it ended, most electronics would begin working again. The physical damage to infrastructure would be real, but repairable, relatively minor compared to what the third event would eventually bring. But the people who came out of those 3 days were changed, not all of them permanently. Some went back to their old patterns quickly, the way people return to bad habits after a brief interruption. But all of them carried something from those 3 days that did not fully leave them. A memory of what it felt like to be present, a memory of what it felt like to actually need the person next to them and to be needed in return. And when the second and third events came, that memory would matter. The date for this first event is March 2nd, 2026. That is when it begins. He communicated to me that these 3 events, taken together, are designed to do something specific. Not to destroy, not to punish, to interrupt, to break the momentum of a way of living that had been carrying people steadily away from the things that actually sustain them, away from each other, away from the practices of faith and prayer and community that human beings have depended on throughout their history, away from the knowledge of how to do basic things with their own hands and their own minds, without relying on systems they do not understand and cannot control. He communicated to me that the people who would come through all 3 events with something real and lasting were the people who took the time between them seriously, the 19 days between the first event and the second, the months between the second and the third. He communicated that those intervals were not waiting periods, they were preparation periods. The most important preparation was not physical. It was not stockpiling or planning escape routes or acquiring equipment. The most important preparation was relational and spiritual. Learning to trust the people around you, learning to practice faith in small daily ways so that when large things came, it was already a habit, learning to be quiet enough, regularly enough to hear something beyond your own thoughts. He communicated to me that the people who would be most valuable to the people around them during these 3 events were not the ones who had the most supplies or the most technical knowledge. They were the people who had built real relationships and who had genuine faith that they had developed over time, not grabbed in a panic at the last moment. Real faith is built slowly, the way real trust is built slowly, the way any real thing is built. Over time, through practice, through showing up consistently even when there is no crisis requiring it. He communicated to me that the physical preparations that mattered were basic. Enough food and water for a few days without access to stores, a way to heat and light a home without electricity, basic medical supplies, knowledge of simple practical skills. These things matter, but they matter far less than the relational and spiritual preparation. The people who had only physical preparation and no relational or spiritual foundation would find that the physical preparation was insufficient, and the people who had genuine faith and genuine relationships with other people of faith would find that their daily needs were met in ways they had not anticipated. He communicated to me, and I want to say this as plainly as I can, that none of these three events is the end of the world. He was clear on this. What is ending is a particular way of organizing human life, a way that had come to depend too heavily on systems that created distance between people and between people and God. What comes after, in the places where people have prepared well, is something he communicated is genuinely better, not easier, not more comfortable in the material sense, but more real, more aligned with how human beings were made to live. I believe that. I believe it not because I am a religious man by nature or by long habit. I am not. I was the man in the coffee shop reading journals while my wife went to Mass. I was the man who needed 3 data points before making a restaurant reservation. I believe it because of what I experienced on the night of February 13th into February 14th of 2026, and because what I was shown has a coherence and a specificity that my professional training in the analysis of complex systems tells me cannot be dismissed. I have built models of invisible realities for 30 years, and I know the difference between random noise and a structured signal. What I was shown was a structured signal. It had a beginning and a middle and an end. It had specific dates attached to specific events with specific characteristics. It had an internal logic that held together from the first showing to the last. My heart started again somewhere in the middle of all of this. I felt it the way you feel a sound in a dream that turns out to be real, distant, and then closer, and then impossible to ignore. And then I was back in my bedroom in New Mexico with Patricia's voice coming from a very long distance away and paramedics working around me, and everything that I had just experienced was still completely present in my mind, sharp and detailed and weighted in a way that nothing I had experienced before or since has approached. I was in the hospital for 6 days. When I came home, I wrote for 3 days without stopping. I wrote everything he showed me in as much detail as I could, while the details were still fully present. And then I sat with it for several weeks before I said anything to anyone, because I wanted to be sure I was saying it responsibly, with the same care I would bring to any serious finding in my professional life. What I am telling you now is what I wrote in those 3 days. It has not changed. The dates have not changed. March 2nd, March 21st, August 2026. 3 events, 3 periods of darkness. 3 periods of darkness, each lasting 3 days, each different from the others, each designed not to destroy but to interrupt, and to invite, and to give people who are willing to receive it the chance to find something they did not know they were missing. Patricia and I attend church together now. I sit next to her, and I hold her hand. I am still learning. I am still a man who approaches things carefully and wants to understand before he commits. But I am also a man who has been on the other side of that waterfall I was not allowed to reach, who has felt what the darkness feels like for those who have nothing inside them to resist it, and who has been shown what is coming for the world I came back to. I am telling you because there is still time. Not unlimited time. The first date is March 2nd, 2026, and that is not far from now. The preparation that matters most, the building of real relationships and real faith and real daily habits of prayer and community. That kind of preparation takes time, more time than a few days before an event. It takes weeks and months of showing up consistently and building something real with the people around you. That is what I was sent back to say. I did not ask for this. I would have been happy to remain a man who dropped his wife at church and drove to the coffee shop. But I cannot unknow what I was shown. I cannot unmeasure what I was given to measure. And I cannot stay quiet about a warning that was given to me specifically, so that I would not stay quiet about it. The 3 events are coming. The first begins March 2nd, 2026. What happens when it arrives depends, more than anything else, on what you choose to do between now and then.